How's it going, everyone? It's Sam. Something really interesting just happened. We have some news about the US government now working with AI, with a couple leading AI companies. Now, there are some concerns about this. I'm going to play a Whitney Webb clip. She talks about what we have to be careful with AI and government working so closely together. And then also, I want to play something. The main concern that I have, it's from the All In podcast where they talk about gain of function research and some of the mistakes that have been made there with the pandemic. And I think it's all tied together. If you don't mind, hit subscribe. Turn on the bell notification underneath the video so you can see future videos like this. And the reason I'm bringing this up is because everything comes back to Bitcoin. If you want freedom, if you want some kind of censorship resistant money, Bitcoin seems to be the answer. And, this is all tied in with AI, the government overreaching, tech companies reviewing your data. If they don't help the governments, they get arrested. We've seen that before now, and we saw news of Zuckerberg being forced to comply with the government earlier this week. Now, if you want to trade crypto, there's a link to Margex underneath the video where you can start trading in just a few minutes, and they don't KYC you, which means they don't have your personal information, which is really important. So if you want to try that out, there's a link underneath the video. If you don't want to try it out, that's fine. There are also a couple links to CoinW, to WEEX, to Blowfin, none of them KYC. And there are links to those underneath the video as well. Some of them have big airdrops, like Margex has a huge Caspa airdrop up to $5,000 depending on how much you trade. There's also a CoinW airdrop that goes up to $15,000 in Bitcoin. A WEEX airdrop for Louis Vuitton or Rolex if you want to go that way. But let's start here. U.S. debt up $65 billion today, or just yesterday. And the Bitcoin balance on exchanges continue to hit all-time lows. So yeah, something interesting there. It seems like when money's devalued and there's more debt, people go buy a scarce asset, which is interesting. Who would have guessed? But let's go over to here. Here we go. U.S. government signs agreements with OpenAI and Anthropic. Now, breaking this down a little bit, they say that OpenAI and Anthropic will give the U.S. government agency early access to a major new model under agreements announced on Thursday. Why it matters. Governments around the world have been pushing for measures, both legislative and otherwise, to evaluate the risks of powerful new AI algorithms. Now, they say that they're doing this because they want to be careful. They want to make sure that AI is used for good and that they're putting up roadblocks and they're trying to fix future issues and stuff like that, that there aren't bad actors, which, in a perfect world would be great. But also, based on what we've seen recently, just a few years ago, when the government was doing testing, and I'll play the all-in clip here in a second, this can actually be an issue when government comes in and tries to help increase safety on a new technology. This can actually be a huge problem. Let me play this clip for you.
Apparently, the COVID-19 investigation is leaning towards a massive cover-up. There's a subcommittee going on right now. The world's not paying attention to this, but I think some savvy people are, especially over on X. There's a lot of great journalists who are doing incredible investigative work. Let me just catch everybody up in the audience real quick here and get the besties involved. Over the past year and a half, a House subcommittee has been focused on the origins of COVID-19. And they've been investigating the NIH's ties with gain-of-function research in Wuhan. The subcommittee was painted early on as like, this is angry Republicans, this is about mask mandates. It was like highly politicized, but it's actually turned out to be very effective bipartisan investigation. We'll get in on that in a minute. But so far, most of the investigation is focused on nailing down this timeline of communication between NIH officials and an organization called EcoHealth Alliance. This is a nonprofit that's focused on infectious disease research. Now, these committee videos are online. We'll play you on in a moment. But through funding in the NIH, the EcoHealth organization was awarded research grants to various labs. This included the Wuhan Institute of Virology, the infamous one. EcoHealth violated terms of its grants by failing to report that gain-of-function experiments were being conducted in Wuhan. EcoHealth was supposed to report any experiment that exhibited characteristics leading it to being 10 times more infectious. But when that happened, it failed to disclose this research to the NIH. And on May 17th, a deputy director of the NIH acknowledged that the agency funded gain-of-function research in Wuhan via EcoHealth. This is the key, because Fauci initially denied this. During his 2021 Senate hearing, Fauci said, quote, "I totally resent the lie you are now propagating in response to questions from Rand Paul about the lab leak theory." So Fauci either didn't know or he lied under oath. Let me pause there for a second. There's a lot more to the story, but when you hear this sort of setup, Friedberg, our Sultan of Science, in this initial setup, what rings concerning to you, true to you, and then we'll go on and we'll play some clips of this testimony, which is pretty wild.
I don't think that pre the emergence of the pandemic that there was nefarious motives.
In other words, their funding of this was not done to create a pandemic. It might have been a mistake in hindsight, but...
Yeah, for many years, particularly following the original SARS pandemic, there was a lot of conversations around how do we get in front of the next pandemic? How do we figure out what's coming? And how do we prepare for it? And there was a lot of research that was launched to try and resolve that key question. This is like the movie 12 Monkeys. You guys ever see that movie? I think at one point.
Yeah, sure.
It's like, does the effort to try and stop the problem cause the problem? I think that from my point of view, there's a very high probability that there was some leak that meant that the work that was going on to try and get in front of the next pandemic and understand what we could do to prepare ourselves and what vaccines could be developed and so on actually led to the pandemic.
Now, as they talked about, like, the fact is, when government comes in, sometimes they just screw up and they're trying to test some dangers and then they build something that is worse than if they had never done any testing in the first place, right? Like gain of function. COVID, I know it used to be controversial, but it might have come out of, and it seems like it came out of testing how bad some kind of disease like this could get. So I'm cautious, and I think this is maybe not the best news in the world that the U.S. is coming in to help or to get information to help collaborate with some of these AI companies. Maybe they're going to, test out how bad an AI can get and then see what they can do to counter it. And then in that case, it actually gets away from them. I think we've seen worse stuff than that happen. Maybe not worse stuff than that happen, but we've seen very similar things to that happening before. So you have to be very cautious. Now, I want to play this Whitney Webb clip too. This is from the What Bitcoin Did podcast, and she talks about AI and some of the dystopian stuff that's to come.
Yeah, some of the censorship stuff has been was a little bit insane then, and has carried on.
It's only going to get more insane.
Really? How bad?
Yeah, because they're trying to put AI in charge of the internet, and not just in charge of censoring what's on the internet, but also having AI make the lion's share of online content. So supposedly by 2025, generative AI like ChatGPT is going to produce like 96 or something % of everything you read online, which means their mainstream media journalists are going to be like completely replaced by them. I think there have been some magazines that have been caught using ChatGPT to write their stories already. I think Sports Illustrated was one. But only going to get crazier. And so when you have AI both like producing and then curating, i.e. censoring, everything, then AI dominates the information environment, and whoever programs AI and stipulates like what information is okay and who isn't has like unprecedented control. And when you consider that most people today get their information from online or, digital sources, that's unprecedented control of what people, not just how the information that people like read and receive, but also, you're manipulating people, how people perceive reality. And that obviously translates into how people behave. And actually, Henry Kissinger, who I'm sure died recently, and the guy that he named as his heir, which is Eric Schmidt, the former Google CEO, wrote a book on AI explicitly about that, and how AI is basically going to control how we perceive reality by taking control of online content in its entirety. And that us becoming increasingly dependent on AI for everything is going to cognitively diminish people so that we won't be able to perceive reality or make sense of anything without AI doing it for us.
It's going to be like, have you seen the film? You seen WALL-E or WALL-E?
Yeah, like maybe years and years and years ago, where the people
so
are
in the pods drinking milkshakes.
Yeah, but worse than that, because it seems like there's sort of like they have some sort of cognitive faculty left. What Kissinger and Schmidt say is that people are going to lose that. And it's the plan that they lose that.
Maybe they just won't need us anymore.
Well, I think, if people can't control how they perceive reality, they're no longer capable of critical analysis and thought. It's very easy to decide what you do with people.
So where does that put you then in terms of AI? Are you pro the technology?
I have a lot of opinions. I
want to hear them all.
Yeah, I don't use them. I think the whole idea of getting a lot of people to use ChatGPT and all of this stuff is to lead us down this path that Kissinger and Schmidt, among others, sort of are charting out for humanity. Where if you, it's pretty much common sense though. Like if you develop a skill and then don't do it for 10 or 15 years, for example, you kind of forget how to do it, right? Or even, I graduated from university a little more than 10 years ago. How well do I recall the stuff that I took in university? Not great, right? So there's this whole idea of if you don't use it, you lose it. So if people are depending on AI to tell them where to turn when they're driving their car and, no one uses actual maps anymore. I understand that it's convenient, right? And I'm not saying we need to go back to the 90s, right? But, it becomes after a while a slippery slope where people are just having the computer tell them everything to do. Every step of their lives ends up becoming micromanaged to an extent. And the idea is that AI, through all the data that it absorbs about us, knows so much about us. Some of these people say it knows us better than we even know ourselves. There's that allows for an unprecedented degree of manipulation. And the problem is that the people producing and programming AI and ultimately controlling AI and what it can do not have our best interests at heart. And it is not a good idea to basically hand them our brains in a bag, we should keep those.
I've been using AI for work a little bit.
Yeah, a lot of people do.
Like a more advanced search engine.
Yeah, totally. But who owns AI, right? It's pretty much Silicon Valley companies. So even OpenAI, Sam Altman's thing, that's essentially owned by Microsoft, right? And so you have Microsoft, Google, Amazon, Oracle, all of these companies essentially owning almost everything. And all of those companies are contractors for the military and intelligence, right? Guess throw Palantir in the mix too. And when you consider something like Palantir, they profile people. They suck up all of your data and then they profile you. And Palantir can profile whether or not they deem you subversive or not. And what happens when AI, gets access of that and gets put in control of things like humanitarian aid, like they're talking about doing, or in charge of, the government itself, which is also talked about in the Schmidt-Kissinger book. It gets complicated. So, a lot of people have been talking about the coming sort of social credit paradigm, for example. So what happens if there's a big crisis, your country is a war zone or the economy collapses and you're dependent on humanitarian aid or some sort of aid from the government or some other group and there isn't enough for everyone, right? And so they decide, it's fairer to put super intelligent AI in charge of it. And then that AI is this person's been very compliant and hasn't committed all of these thought crimes, but not you. Who is it going to decide to give the food rations to and stuff like that? That's the risk of a lot of this stuff when it gets put in charge of too many systems. If someone wants to make an open source AI that, does some stuff, I'm not going to be no, don't do that. But, I think it's very important now more than ever to divest as much as possible from big tech, Google and Oracle and, all these other companies, Amazon, what have you, because they have too much power. The people in charge have obvious problematic agendas. And they basically, at least in the US, they own the government. I mean, they basically control the government. The tech billionaires fund almost all the politicians. They have access to all of the data of the military and intelligence agencies. And frankly, the Silicon Valley companies and the national security state in the US have fused 100%. They are the same blob. You can't tell where one ends and one begins anymore. That's highly problematic. That's fascism, right? When corporations and government fuse. So yeah, Silicon Valley fascism has arrived, at least in the United States. I think a lot of people just haven't realized it yet. So those companies we cannot feed, and they feed off of our data. They've been saying for years, data is the new oil. So instead of the oil barons of the early 20th century, these are the data barons of now. We need to divest from them if we do not want them to have extreme entrenched power. Because
Now, of course, I'm not just trying to fearmonger, right? I'm trying to instill some vigilance, right? Like, hey, we have to pay attention to this. We have to evaluate what we think about these things because it is really important for the future. Now, of course, if you do want some censorship-resistant money, maybe go buy some Bitcoin. Of course, do your own due diligence, though. If you want to trade crypto, there's this link underneath the video to Margex. Let me know if you like these videos. It seems like people do like the Whitney Webb videos. So I like to make them, and I think they are important because this all ties together. Politics, AI, money, it all ties together now. So yeah, I think it's important to stay educated on everything that's happening. I know some people are scared too after I play Whitney Webb videos, and I will say it is scary to think about what's coming in the future, and it does seem like it's coming faster and faster, but there is hope. Thank you so much for watching. I appreciate it. Check out the links underneath the video, and I'll see you in the next one.